What if the most advanced airliner in the world was brought down not by a catastrophic failure, but by its own skin? The Airbus A350 was a revolution in composite technology designed for unmatched efficiency and passenger comfort. But a mysterious peeling paint issue on Qatar Airways' Flite ignited a multi-billion-dollar war between the airline and the manufacturer. This is the story of how a problem that was only microns deep spiraled into one of the ugliest and most expensive disputes in modern aviation history. Was this a genuine safety crisis that threatened the lives of passengers, or a manufactured conflict in a high-stakes game of commercial chess? To understand how this conflict started, you have to understand the A350 itself. This wasn't just another plane, it was a technological leap. For decades, airliners had been built primarily from aluminum. It was strong, light, and most importantly, it conducted electricity. This last part is crucial. An aluminum fuselage acts like a Faraday cage, allowing the massive energy of a lightning strike to flow safely over the skin and dissipate, protecting everything inside. But the A350 is different. Over half of its structure, including the fuselage and wings, is made from carbon fiber reinforced plastic, or CFRP. This composite material is incredibly strong and much lighter than aluminum, which is the key to the plane's amazing fuel efficiency. But it has one major drawback: it doesn't conduct electricity well. This meant Airbus had to invent a new kind of skin. Engineers embedded a thin metallic layer of expanded copper foil directly into the composite structure just beneath the paint. This layer was designed to act as a man-made Faraday cage, a vital shield against lightning. For this system to work, the bond between the carbon fiber, the copper mesh, and the outer layers of paint had to be perfect. It had to withstand the brutal conditions of flight, the flexing of the fuselage, and the extreme temperature swings from a hot runway to the freezing cold of 35,000 feet. But this perfect solution had a hidden flaw, one that would only reveal itself after thousands of hours in the sky, and it would threaten to tear apart one of the most important relationships in aviation. The problem first came to light not in a high-tech lab, but in a paint shop. In late 2020, Qatar Airways sent one of its A350 jets to be repainted in a special livery for the upcoming World Cup. As workers stripped away the old paint, they found something disturbing. The surface underneath was covered in cracks, and in some areas, the paint was blistering and peeling away from the copper lightning protection mesh. Qatar Airways immediately raised the alarm with Airbus, but the manufacturer's initial response was that the issue was merely cosmetic. This was a known but non-structural issue that did not affect the safety of the aircraft. They had a repair plan and it would be covered under warranty. But for Qatar Airways and its famously demanding CEO, Akbar Al-Baker, this explanation was not good enough. The peeling wasn't just a paint problem, it was exposing the very system designed to protect the plane from a catastrophic lightning strike. They believed the damage to this copper mesh was a direct threat to the plane's airworthiness. The battle lines were drawn. On one side, an airline convinced it had discovered a serious design flaw. On the other, a manufacturer insisting the problem was only skin deep. This fundamental disagreement, born in a quiet hangar, was about to erupt into a very public war. But how could a simple paint job ignite a $2 billion conflict? The answer came when a powerful third party stepped in. For months, the dispute remained a tense private negotiation. Then, in the summer of 2021, everything changed. The Qatar Civil Aviation Authority, or QCAA, the country's national air safety regulator, intervened. After inspecting the planes, they issued an explicit written instruction to Qatar Airways to ground its affected A350 aircraft. This was no longer just a disagreement between a customer and a supplier. This was a legally binding safety order from a government body. The QCAA's decision was the trigger that turned a commercial dispute into a global crisis. It gave Qatar Airways the legal ammunition it needed. The airline could now argue that Airbus had sold them a product that was officially deemed unsafe to fly by its national regulator. The grounding started with 13 aircraft, but the number quickly grew, eventually reaching 29 planes, more than half of the airline's A350 fleet. The stakes were now immense. For Qatar Airways, it was a logistical and financial nightmare. A huge portion of its long-haul fleet was stuck on the tarmac, forcing the airline to reactivate its giant fuel-guzzling A380s to cover the routes. With its planes grounded, Qatar Airways was losing millions of dollars every single day. They decided to fight back, not in the hangar, but in the highest court in in London. In December 2021, Qatar Airways filed a formal lawsuit against Airbus in the London High Court. The airline was initially seeking over $600 million in compensation for the grounded fleet. That number would soon balloon as the grounding dragged on, with the airline adding $4 million to the claim for every additional day the planes were out of service. The total claim would eventually approach $2 billion. The dispute was now a public spectacle, with each side releasing statements and videos to argue their case. Qatar Airways published footage showing workers peeling back large strips of blistered paint and damaged copper mesh from a plane's fuselage with their gloved hands, revealing the bare black carbon fiber underneath. The airline argued that Airbus had failed to provide a proper root cause analysis and that its proposed patch repairs were just a temporary fix for a much deeper problem. Airbus, facing a massive lawsuit and a public relations nightmare, had a choice: defend their plane or go on the attack. They chose to attack. They maintained that the plane was perfectly safe and that Qatar Airways was mischaracterizing the issue to avoid taking delivery of new planes and to seek compensation. But their next move would stun the entire aviation industry. In January 2022, Airbus did something almost unheard of in the tightly knit world of aviation. It fought back not by defending the A350, but by cancelling a completely different and arguably more important contract with Qatar Airways. In a shocking act of commercial retaliation, Airbus unilaterally terminated the airline's order for 50 A321neo aircraft. This was the nuclear option. The A321neo was the cornerstone of Qatar Airways' future plans for its short and medium-haul network. It was one of the most popular and best-selling airliners in the world, with a production backlog that stretched for years. By cancelling the order, Airbus was not just punishing its customer, it was inflicting serious, long-term strategic damage. Airbus argued it was legally entitled to do this because of a cross-default clause in its contracts, which meant that a failure by Qatar to meet its obligations on the A350 contract by refusing to accept deliveries allowed Airbus to terminate other agreements. This move transformed the fight. It was no longer about paint and lightning protection on one type of aircraft. It was now a brutal, high-stakes battle over contractual law and the balance of power between a manufacturer and one of its biggest customers. Airbus had just fired its most powerful weapon, but the fight was far from over because another, more powerful authority was about to weigh in. Airbus's decision to cancel the A321neo order wasn't just a move against Qatar, it sent a shockwave across the entire industry. For years, the two giants of aviation, Airbus and Boeing, had fought for every major airline contract. Now, Airbus had voluntarily pushed one of its biggest customers directly toward its only rival. In Seattle, at the headquarters of Boeing, that shockwave must have felt like a golden opportunity. Qatar Airways, now facing a critical gap in its future fleet, moved with lightning speed. Within days of the cancellation, the airline announced a massive new deal with Boeing. The agreement was for up to 50 Boeing 737 MAX 10s, the direct competitor to the A321neo, and a firm order for 34 of the brand new 777X freighter, making Qatar the launch customer for the program. It was a stunning reversal of fortune. The dispute had handed Boeing a multi-billion-dollar victory on a silver platter, fundamentally shifting the market dynamics in the narrow-body and cargo sectors. The fallout even spilled into the courtroom in a bizarre twist. As part of its legal strategy, Airbus's lawyers demanded that the London court force Qatar Airways to show them the confidential details of its new contract with Boeing. The move forced Boeing's own legal team to show up in court to protect its sensitive pricing and delivery information from its biggest competitor. The fight was no longer just about peeling paint. It had become a three-way corporate drama, with Boeing playing the role of the unexpected beneficiary. The head of the International Air Transport Association, Willie Walsh, called the cancellation a worrying development that set a concerning precedent for the industry. But while the commercial battle raged and market shares shifted, the core of the dispute remained unresolved. The question of the A350's safety was now being fought on an even more important front. Not between two companies, but between their powerful government regulators, who had come to two completely different conclusions. The reason this dispute could escalate so dramatically was because of a fundamental split between the two main regulators involved. On one side was the QCAA, which had grounded the planes. On the other was the European Union Aviation Safety Agency, or EASA, Airbus's home regulator and the body that originally certified the A350 as safe to fly. And ESA completely disagreed with its Qatari counterpart. ESA repeatedly investigated the paint issue and consistently came to the same conclusion. The condition had no airworthiness impact. They publicly backed Airbus, stating that the aircraft were safe to fly. This created a bizarre and unprecedented situation. The international aviation system is built on a foundation of mutual trust and recognition between national regulators. The regulator in the country where a plane is operated is supposed to trust the judgment of the regulator in the country where it was designed and built. The QCAA's decision to break from this convention created two contradictory realities. In Qatar, the A350 was legally unairworthy. Everywhere else in the world, it was perfectly safe. This regulatory schism allowed both sides to claim they were in the right, forcing a technical safety debate into a commercial courtroom that was not equipped to decide which regulator to believe. But as the legal battle heated up, a new piece of information emerged that made the entire situation even more mysterious. As the conflict raged on, it was revealed that the A350's paint problem was not unique to Qatar Airways. In fact, at least 5 other major international airlines, including Finnair, Cathay Pacific, Lufthansa and Delta Airlines, had experienced and reported similar issues to Airbus, some as far back as 2016. However, their response was completely different. None of them grounded their planes. None of them declared it a safety crisis. They treated it as a quality control or warranty issue and worked quietly with Airbus to get the affected planes repainted. Lufthansa, for example, confirmed it had seen cosmetic damage, but that it had no impact on the plane's operations. This raises an intriguing question. If the problem was so widespread, why was Qatar the only one to declare a full-blown crisis? The airline's famously high standards and the aggressive stance of the QCAA were certainly key factors, but it also led Airbus to suggest that Qatar Airways was using the paint issue as an excuse to get out of taking delivery of new planes during the COVID-19 pandemic, when demand for international travel had collapsed. Whatever the reason, this revelation added a new layer of complexity to the dispute, suggesting that the conflict was about more than just safety. It was also about leverage, timing, and strategy. After nearly 2 years of bitter public fighting, the prospect of a full 3-month trial in the London High Court loomed. This trial threatened to be incredibly damaging for both sides. It would force the public release of thousands of sensitive internal documents, potentially exposing embarrassing details about Airbus's manufacturing processes and Qatar's communications with its regulator. A loss for Airbus could cost them billions and set a precedent for other airlines. A loss for Qatar could undermine their safety claims and leave them permanently without the A321neo jets they desperately needed. Faced with this mutually destructive outcome, they chose peace. In February 2023, just months before the trial was set to begin, the two companies announced they had reached an amicable settlement. While the financial details were kept secret, the public terms were a stunning reversal. All legal claims were dropped. A repair project for the grounded A350s was officially underway, and most importantly, Airbus agreed to reinstate all the cancelled orders, including the 23 remaining A350s and, crucially, the entire 50-plane order for the A321neo. The settlement was a pragmatic retreat. Both sides realized that their long-term relationship was more valuable than winning the fight. The most telling part was Airbus's decision to give back the A321neo order. They had won the legal right in court to cancel it, but the commercial cost of permanently losing a major customer to their rival Boeing was simply too high. It was a clear sign that in the high-stakes world of the aviation duopoly, sometimes you need your customers as much as they need you. So was the great A350 grounding a genuine safety crisis, or a calculated move in a multi-billion-dollar corporate chess match? Click here to check out another video, and make sure to subscribe.